Hello everyone, in this session what I want to do is give you some more inspiration for your sketchbook practice and take you through some different supply combinations. So you can see in front of me I have a whole bunch of sketchbooks, and what I often find is that the last page or the last few pages of a sketchbook I seem to abandon and never get to finishing. So some of these are almost complete, and what I wanted to do today was spend this session getting some paint onto these pages and showing you different beginnings and different starting points, and also talking through some of the supplies that we'll be using throughout this course. So I hope that you enjoy the session and it gives you some ideas. There's no right or wrong ways to approach this, and what I often find is that using supplies as a starting point can be really helpful. And what I mean by that is that you can just focus on the materials, get into the process, and then as you continue to work, you can spend a little bit more time thinking about what's coming through and what kind of personal meaning you want to bring into your spreads. But sometimes the best thing to do is to just get something down on the page, and that's what this is all about. It's about starting quickly, getting into the process, letting go of perfectionism, and just having fun. So with that said, let's get started. So I've picked up this fairly small sketchbook. This is the Clairefontaine, I think is the name of the sketchbook. I'll check it out and I'll leave it in the description. I'll list all the different sketchbooks that I'm using just in case you are interested. And what I'm going to do with this one is start a page using a catalyst tool. So if you don't have one of these, you could use a credit card or something like that. But what we are going to do is use a scraping method to get some paint down. So I've just picked out a few different watercolours that I'll be using. I've got the Buff Titanium, Mayan Blue Genuine, and this one is the Quinacridone Deep Gold. So that's a starting point, and I will just wet these, get them going. So I will be putting the paint on with a brush initially. And then using my scraping tool, oops, got some paint on there. So I'm starting with the lightest colours first, and I'm going to build up some layering. So this will be just the beginning. It's not going to look like very much on the page to start with, but you'll often find that my paintings are like that. They start with this very light layer, because the beauty really comes in building up those transparencies. So there's our first layer. I'm just going to use a hairdryer to quickly dry this off so that I can continue layering just to get that base. And I'm going to build up a few different colours. Okay, so that's fairly dry. So now I can mix a little bit more of that Mayan Blue Genuine in to get another colour. And just we can go over the top now. Okay, so I'll dry that off. So now I'm going to bring in an even darker colour. So this is the Indanthrone Blue, or you could use something like indigo if you have it. Any kind of dark blue is nice. I'm just going to use this catalyst tool just to move it around. I quite like how it's placed there anyway, so can just manipulate it a little bit and then do a bit of mark making as well. Okay, so I've got my base down, and I was experimenting with applying the watercolour using the catalyst tool just to give a different kind of effect. So when you add it in with a brush or something like a mop brush, you get sort of those more rounded shapes, whereas if you use a scrapey tool, you're going to get more angles and things like that. So now I am going to decide what other supply could I add. So this is a supply combination kind of challenge, and what I'm thinking at the moment is adding some gold leaf over the top. So gold leaf usually comes with an adhesive that you can use. So this one here, you just apply it and then leave it for about 10 minutes or so. This one actually says 25 minutes, but usually in our climate it doesn't take that long. So I'm going to apply it, let it get tacky, and then I'll put the gold leaf on. So I want to create a bit of a bigger section of the gold area through here. So it's going to be a little bit of a focal area. I don't really know how it will apply, because it's the beauty of gold leaf is it kind of has a mind of its own. But what this little spread is now making me think of is kind of like a coastal scene, waves splashing, and we will see, because it's an experiment, whether we like the effect or not. So I'm just going to put some smaller little dots here. So there should be a larger section, some bigger marks, and then some little marks, but we will see when it all dries. So I'm going to put that aside now and wait for it to dry, and then I'll come back and apply the gold leaf. So another sketchbook that I've almost finished. I've just got a couple of pages left to go. So this one is the Stillman and Burn Alpha series, and this has a bit of a thinner paper. It's a mixed media paper. It handles wet media okay, but it does get a bit crumply, which I don't mind too much. I've had a lot of fun in this sketchbook. But anyway, I am going to get started on this particular spread using the Neocolor 2s. So I'm going to pick some colours. Let me have a good rummage here, see if there's anything calling out my name. I'm feeling like some greens might be nice. Maybe greens and blues. So for this particular spread, I'm just going to go in there with some scribbly shapes, and then I'll activate them with water. And as I work in this way, I quite intuitively try and get some big shapes and smaller areas in, because that can really help with just building up something on the page that you can then work with without thinking about it too much. So I'm just going to grab any brush, and this is just a round brush, and activate some of these areas. And you can just see how vibrant the colour can be. So this is, what colour is it? Prussian blue, and it's super pigmented. You can really get it going and add quite a lot of water if you want to. And if you do that, you can even, get some drips going. And if you see something that you like, you just do a bit more of it. Like I quite like this brown colour, just because it brings a little bit of earthiness in to these more bright colours. And you could even see how that colour looks when you bring it into the blue. So if we mix these two colours together, so I'm going to do that over here. And even just keeping some of those scribbles is nice, flowing through, or showing through, I should say, the paint. You can bring mark making through the wet page. And then you can take something like a brush and just wet the end of the Neocolor 2. This is a technique that I've been really getting into to create splatters, and I've shared it a bit on social media, but it's really fun for just getting little splattered details down on the page. And you can put it into the wet areas, so you'll get a bit of a wet and wet type effect, or you can do it on the dry areas. You can get really big. You can see there's some bigger shapes too. So I'm going to leave that starting point to dry now, and you can then come back over the top and add something else. So with this challenge, I would suggest starting with one supply, letting it dry, and then coming over the top with something different to see how the two supplies interact together. So you could come over the top with acrylic paint. What else could we use? I'm just trying to think what would be nice. Oil pastel could be good, something like that to add some more details in. So let's leave that one to dry. Let's grab another sketchbook. So for this one, I'm using tape. So this is the Handbook Journal Company sketchbook. So this is one of my all-time favorite sketchbooks. It's got watercolor paper in it, and it's a cold press paper, lies really nice and flat. And for this one, I'm using tape. This is an artist tape. It's actually, I've had this one for a long time and it's starting to lose some of its stickiness. So I have to make sure I press it down really well because I've been having a few problems with things seeping underneath. And add that to the edges. This is going to give the page a bit of a frame, which can look really nice. You'll see me doing a lot of this when I'm painting. I really like having that edge and working with tape. So for this one, I am going to start with some oil pastel. And I'm going to explore how the oil pastel resists paint. So when you add something that's water-based over the top, it's going to resist the oil. So let's try that. I have some acrylic ink here. So for this, I'm using a mixture of white ink, Payne's grey, ultramarine, and some burnt sienna. So we'll see what kind of combo we can get with all of that. So I'm just mixing up a neutral now. So this is the white with a little bit of the burnt sienna in it and a little bit of the ultramarine blue. So I can start with, again, starting with a light colour. Okay, so I have layered in, again, I'm using light to dark, so bringing in the light colour, a little bit of the sort of blue grey, and then going in with some more of the dark Payne's grey just to bring in some contrast. And I'll allow that to dry and see how this oil pastel works with the acrylic ink, and then I might bring some more of that oil pastel in for some details over the top. So now the adhesive is tacky. It's probably been about 15 minutes or so, and I have one of the gold leaf sheets, and I will just start by layering that and pressing it down, and it will adhere to wherever there is glue. So now we can get a dry brush and just start to rub away any of the excess. So it's up to you. If you want to, you can write any notes on your sketchbook. For this particular exercise, I'm just going to record what I've used and how I did it. If you want to keep your page just as an art page, that's absolutely fine too. But I quite like to write some notes. So this particular page was watercolour applied with a catalyst blade. And you can put the date. This is the 25th of May. So there you have one sketchbook experiment completed that you can refer back to, and if you enjoyed that technique and you like the layering, then that might be something that you want to bring into your work. There's a piece on my mood board behind me with the green botanical, and you can see the layering behind that was done in the same way. So using a catalyst blade and layers of watercolour and ink just to build up some interest in the background. I'm going to give this one a bit of a dry. And sometimes I even deliberately dry really drippy areas to create marks. So we'll see if that happens now. But if it's quite drippy and you blow on it, it's just like blowing on it with a straw. So it'll push the paint around. Need the high setting. So for this particular spread, I'm going to add some acrylic paint over the top. And I do have a few sketchbook spreads in one of my sketchbooks behind me where I have done this. So what I might do is just grab that and have a flick through. So the more you work in sketchbooks, the more reference material you have. So when you are faced with a page and you're not quite sure what direction to take it in, you might just think of something that you've created before, have a flick through, and that might help you. So that's one of the reasons why I'm so into sketchbooks and so into having a sketchbook practice, because they really are helpful tools. Okay, so you can see in this particular sketchbook, I've done quite a lot of this. So this page here was the Neo Color 2 background, this page here as well. So I have used this starting point quite often just because Neo Color 2s are so easy to just scrub down and get some paint down quickly. So I am going to have a look. I really like this page here and how this one turned out. And you can sort of see how you can develop it more by adding something over the top. So that's what I think I will do with that one. So I might not get it fully finished because it looks to me like a page that could do with quite a few layers, but I am going to add that second layer of the acrylic just to explore that relationship between the Neocolor 2s and acrylic paint. So I have a few colours here. I have some antique white and some Jenkins green and some burnt sienna. So they're the colours that I am going to use. So this is the Neo Color 2, and I really liked the Prussian blue, so I'll just make a note. The Prussian blue is very intense. And then acrylic paint layered on top. And just to keep it interesting, I'm going to use another catalyst tool, maybe a scraper as well. I have this scraper, I'm not sure where I got this from, but it's another silicone tool. So silicone tools are flexible, they're really good with acrylic paint. I'm just looking at the little flicks of gold that are floating down on top of this and thinking this spread would actually look really nice with gold details if you like gold. But we want to mix it up. That's the idea of this session, just to give you some ideas on how to throw your supplies around and have fun with them. So we'll go with the acrylic. Working this way, you're going to find your area gets pretty messy quickly. You might want to tidy up a bit between each challenge that you do. So this is an antique white. I use this a lot because it's a slightly warmer white than titanium white, but you could mix something like this just by adding a little bit of burnt sienna or a bit of yellow ochre or something earthy into a white to get your off-white colour. So I'm just going to start by applying some of this in a section and maybe putting some, just using the brush lightly over here as well. Less can definitely be more when you start adding in acrylic paint, because you can't really take it away once you've put it down. So sometimes I like just skimming my brush over just to get sort of that rougher texture. And now let's have a look at what scratchy ones we've got here. And you can see how nicely that works with the heavier bodied acrylic paint. This is working just with the white. I was going to use the green and the brown a bit, but there's already such a lot of colour in the background that I might just see how this looks. So I'm taking the tip now and just using that to do a little bit of mark making. And you'll see how when you add acrylic paint over the top of the Neocolor 2 that it does reactivate the Neocolor 2. So your paint takes on a little bit of a tinge, especially if you manipulate it a bit. So if you're sort of scrubbing in with it, it's going to, so you can see how that paint's turning blue just from scrubbing in with my brush, creating a different color. So I'm just calming certain sections of this spread down because it was quite a busy background, and it's nice to sort of have a bit of breathing space in there. I'm going to push a bit just here. I'm curious to see how much of that yellowy colour it picks up. I'm noticing how the paint is really mixing in, the cream paint is mixing in with the colours on the background, and that's creating new colours. So we've got a lovely little bit of minty green, a bit of blue, a bit of lemon yellow. So I haven't actually needed to add any more colour in. Just using that white paint has softened it and created these pastel colours in certain areas. So that might be something worth noting if I could find my pen in amongst all this chaos. I will just make a note that the Neocolor reactivates. So this is teaching me something about the supplies just through doing this sketchbook page. So especially if you are new to making art, then these sorts of exercises will really help you to get to know what you're working with so that you can get really confident in your tools and your materials and know how to achieve certain effects or how not to achieve certain effects. So if you don't like what's happening here, then you'll know that the Neocolors 2s do reactivate, and maybe you could use the Neocolor 1s, which aren't water soluble, or something like that. So Neocolor 2, should make that note, Neocolor 2 reactivates with the acrylic paint. So in this way, your sketchbook can become very much a working book. It becomes a diary that you can fill in. You can write things about the supplies, but also how you are feeling as you create. You can refer back to it. It's really handy. So I'm quite liking how this page turned out, and I do like the way that these areas have calmed it down. So there's a little bit of a focal area here, but there's some space around it because it did feel quite busy and quite vibrant when I first did that base layer. Sometimes it's a really good idea to go in vibrant at the beginning, have some bright colors, and then calm things down as you go. I often do that in my acrylic paintings, my big canvas paintings. I can start off with something bright and then modify and make it a little bit more relaxing and calming as I go. So let's come back to this one here with the oil pastel. Okay, so you can see the oil pastel there. It's still a little bit tacky and sticky as you would expect, and you can actually sort of rub it to bring it sort of back to the surface. And same goes with if you're working on a canvas with acrylic paint and you put acrylic over oil pastel, you just can scrape it. You can get a scrapey tool and bring the oil pastel back. So it's always accessible to you because it doesn't get fully sealed over. And I quite like rubbing my oil pastel, one, because it makes it less sticky so I don't have to seal the page, and it just stuffs it up so I don't worry about it smudging because I'm purposely smudging it. So with this one here, I think I'll go in with a paint pen. So this will be the combination of ink and a paint pen. So I have this blue color here, and I'm just thinking about what kind of pattern I want to bring in. I'm sort of feeling like something in this section where it's nice and dark over the top would be really good. So where will we go with it? So I might just do some lines in different directions and see. So I often use repetitive mark making with Posca paint pen in my work. So this is something that I find very enjoyable, relaxing, easy way to bring kind of detail and a pop to a painting. It's also something that's nice to do when you aren't in the mood for a whole lot of messy paint. You can just open a sketchbook and add detail in, and I think I've said that a lot in my classes, but I do really enjoy the ease of pens like this and combining pen with paint. I just remembered that this particular spread was about oil pastel and ink, and I've added in a third. So this one is a bit of a trio of supplies because I added in the Posca paint pen. And I think that's just because Posca paint pens are such a go-to for me that it almost didn't feel right to sit down and do a painting session without at least adding in some pen work. But anyway, I thought I'd come back to the oil pastel. I might just write because I have a little bit of room here to write about my experiment. So I am seeing here some really beautiful pigment coming through from the inks. One of the things I love about inks is just how they mingle. They really play together nicely and create some interesting effects. So I'm just going to bring some of this really vibrant blue through. And what I will probably do with this particular spread is spray it with some oil pastel fixative once I've finished, because I do want to leave this oil pastel as is, and it will be a bit sticky and it will smudge when I close the page. So I will fix it with a fixative just to reduce a bit of that, or you could get a piece of greaseproof paper, put it in your sketchbook to protect the oil pastel. That's another possibility. It's good to experiment with oil pastel. I feel like it's a supplier that's really beautiful, but not for everyone because they are a bit tricky to seal and they are a bit messy, but they can also be fabulous, and the colors are really vibrant and they can really give a painting a needed pop, which is why I often use them towards the end of a painting just to add that finishing touch. And I like using them on my big canvases for that reason. So I think I'm going to bring another line through this. It might be too much, but I think it might be nice to bring a bit more Posca pen through. So I'm not going to bring it through where the oil pastel is because that's going to be a quick way to ruin my pen. So this piece, I've almost worked on it as if it was a finished painting. You don't need to necessarily do that. You can just continue on with keeping it very experimental and not sort of turning it into a complete spread. But if you find that as you're working, you just start to really enjoy it and you start to see it coming together, then you can just keep on going with it. So I'm not sure if I actually really love the last bit that I put in, but that's all part of the process. You learn through doing, so you just need to keep doing and keep thinking it through, assessing it, deciding what you like, what you don't like. It's all part of the process. It's all very important. All artists will paint some things they love, some things they don't. And the key is really just to find something that you love in each painting. So I always take that approach, and as long as I can find something I love in there, then it's been a really good painting session. Oh, there's actually one other thing I might mention, because this actually came up the other day, but often if I have a tricky painting session, and they do happen where I feel like everything just went backwards, I didn't come up with anything that I really loved, often I find that that seems to come just ahead of a really good painting session. So often then the next day I'll come in and I will paint all of the things that I had wanted to paint, or discover the things that I wanted to discover in the next session. So if you get to the end of a session and you're feeling a little bit out of sorts, just remember that good things are coming, because the learning is happening no matter what. So I'll leave you with that. I will just pull the tape up on this piece and bring the 3 spreads that I worked on in so you can have a look at them. But I hope that this has inspired you to just get your supplies out, get into the process, enjoy the process, try things out, be experimental, and be open to the learning that comes through.